What's up YouTube, it's Celtic here, and today I am back with the next edition in our Smite Beginner's Guide series. Today we're going to be talking about the in-game basics. Stuff like rotations, communication, etc. So let's dive in. So despite the Conquest play in the background, this is not a Conquest focused video, but a lot of the stuff I'm going to cover will help you out in a Conquest setting. That being said, the first thing I'm going to be covering today is the general how to move in-game. So there's a lot of movement in Smite. It's a very big map, and no matter what map you're playing, you're always going to be moving. Even in Arena, where it's just a bloody circle, you are going to be moving around that circle quite a bit. But you also have to move with a purpose, and that's where rotations come in. And rotating is basically just what people in MOBAs are calling moving around the map with a purpose, right? You never want to move without purpose. Now, there's offensive and there's defensive rotations, and basically the difference is when you leave your lane. So I'm going to use a sports analogy to describe this, and bear with me, I hope this is still relevant. So in basketball, when you're playing as kids and in high school, you are often told to grab a man to get your check. In a sense, this can work very well in Smite because you are going to be manning up, right? If you go to the same lane as someone, let's use Conquest as the example here. You're going to say, okay, I'm Jin Wei, I am going to guard Neith. Wherever Neith goes, I am going to try and follow, right? Because I don't want them to get an advantage somewhere else. Now, at the same time, you got to realize that Neith is also worried about checking me. So that's where these offensive and defensive rotations come in, because if I'm leaving lane first, I'm taking an offensive stance. I'm trying to make a play somewhere else, right? It might just be simply getting a buff, but that's still a play not in my lane, right? And whenever someone leaves their lane, or the lane that you're in, you want to be able to communicate that to your team. And that is the next thing that we're going to talk about today, and that's communication. Now, Smite did recently integrate voice chat into the game, but that's only for ranked and parties, and I don't expect everyone here to be a ranked player. So we're gonna first of all cover VGS. So VGS is basically a bunch of pre-made prompts that you can use to communicate with teammates, and there's no way to really learn them unless you memorize the living crap out of them. But all I can really tell you is that V activates it, and then there's a whole bunch of options. Right, to quickly help you out, if you want to attack or signal that you're attacking, you can use A, and then the towers are always consistent. Left lane is always 1, middle is always 2, and right is always 3. So if we're attacking left lane, you're hitting V, A, and 1. Now, the only thing that gets tricky is, for some reason, missing is F. Now, on one hand, it's good that missing is F because it's a lot easier for your fingers to reach, but it's just, I don't know, the rest at least kind of makes sense. But regardless, just know missing is F, and missing is the most important call. Missing and then retreat. So missing is with F, retreat is with R, okay? And then again, the lanes are consistent. Now, remember, when someone is leaving your lane, you have to assume the worst. You have to assume that they're going to be ganking and making you look bad, right? If you've ever played basketball and you had the person that you were guarding do a cut and they score, that doesn't look good on your defensive abilities. So you want to make sure that you're calling it and telling your teammates, hey, cover, or get the hell out of there because they're going to kill you. Now, rotating really comes in two phases. Either you leave first and they leave first, and then there's the response, right? So first someone leaves, second someone responds. You don't want to be late to the response. So at most, the thing you should do is clear your wave, and then you should start trying to rotate yourself, because you don't want your team to be fighting a lopsided team fight, because that's never good for anyone. So you want to make sure that when someone leaves your lane, you're calling it, finishing what you're doing, and then rotating. But that's all I want to cover on rotations today, because we're already 4 minutes in. So let's move on to something else. Let's move on to buffs, because buffs are very important in this game. Quick note on buffs, remember, each player is only allowed one of the buffs at a time. The only exception to this is if you were to have Fire Giant buff or Apophis, to which you are then allowed to have the two. So the major buff and then the minor buff. But anyways, let's dive into these specific buffs and what each one does. So in Conquest, there's 4 buffs that you can capture. Yellow is speed. Speed increases your movement speed. The blue buff is a mana buff. It gives you mana over time and gives you some cooldown reduction. Then we also have the damage buff. It is red and it increases your power by 20%, and then also a flat amount on top of that. Damage buff is very strong for the carries. And then purple buff in this game mode is a protection debuff on enemies. So you pick it up and then there's an order around you where the enemies get debuffed. So those are the buffs that are appearing in Conquest. I'll just make a couple quick notes that in Clash, the buffs get stronger the more times you drop them. And then in Arena, purple buff actually isn't a protection debuff, it is still an attack speed buff for a hunter or an assassin to pick up. So the buff that you're going to be picking up depends on your playstyle and your team role. And I'm going to cover that in another video in the future, but for right now, those are just what the buffs do, and in casual game modes, go nuts. Now, the last thing that I'm going to be covering in today's guide is teamwork, because Smite is a team game whether you like it or not. And you have to work together as a team if you want to be successful, and I know that's hard at times, but you have to. Trust me, working together is better than not. So how do you work as a team? So basically, as I've covered in the past, each class and each role has different things that they're trying to accomplish. And each one has to do sort of their job per se, right? For instance, right now I'm playing a hunter. My job is to do auto attack damage to kill people and towers. And I can't do that if everyone on the enemy team is constantly diving me. So for instance, you want to make sure as a hunter that you're dealing as much damage as you can. But then on the flip side, if you're supporting that hunter, you want to make sure that they're not dying, right? Because they can't do damage if they're dead. So as supports, you want to kind of do this sort of jigsaw. I'm going to bring up a map on Photoshop and we're going to go through this. All right, so here's a pretty normal looking team fight scenario. So we got our front line up front, our back lines respectively, and then the assassins waiting in the wings to really go and tear. So in the case where one team is trying to engage on the other, that's either going to be done by the Guardian or the Warrior. But in the thick of things, and that's where we're going to go for this, the Warriors are going to be in the back line trying to kill them. The Assassins are going to be with their Warriors, really going at that back line. And then the Guardians are left with a decision. Do I dive or do I protect? And most of the time that answer needs to be protect, because if you can so much as give these hunters just a little bit of space so that they can kill the assassin or kill the warrior, well then your team is looking a lot better. Guardians have a lot of crowd control by nature, and warriors to a degree can too, but warriors have the main job of making space, right? So let's just use this warrior as an example. If this warrior and assassin manage to, say, kill the mage or push them back and they have to go back to Fountain, then the odds of this 5 taking on the remaining 3, suddenly they're at a major advantage, and that's what you want. You want to create an advantage. So warriors are looking to create space, assassins are looking to pick off the squishies, and then the guardians are looking to make sure that the assassin and warrior can't do their job easily. So the last point I'm going to make on teamwork and in this video in general is make sure you're playing for each other. It's not always about getting kills. Kills aren't as important as objectives in the current state of Smite. So make sure if you push that guy out, if you're that warrior and you successfully get them to go back to base, fall back. Don't chase kills. Fall back, save a teammate. They'll thank you for it, you'll all be alive, and then you'll win the game. Well, that's all the time that I have for this video. Next week, I'm going to be covering some mistakes that I see a lot of new players making and what you can be doing in order to remedy them. So subscribe so you don't miss that. But anyways, that's all the time that I have. This is Celtic, signing off. Have a casual day.